Okay, so I just wanted to make a quick video on how I'm using Tonex and how I'm using my pedal board with that. And I'll try it on a couple different strats because I know that strats are pretty much like a universal guitar that most people have a strat or something similar like a telly. Okay, so as far as like my board goes, I mean, it's pretty much the same thing I've done for years. As far as workflow goes, I'm still using the PBC 6X Mastermind from RJM. And before that in the loop, I have my Origin Effects Cali 76. And the first thing in the loop is my Greer amps Lightspeed or whatever preamp pedal that I'm using at the time. Just the compressor with nothing else sounds like this. And without the compressor, which again is not in the loops of the Mastermind, not a whole lot of difference. And I am on the bridge pickup, which is a humbucker. Cali 76 is basically there for feel, and if I need to give more to the mix, I will. I like to keep it to where I feel it and don't notice it a whole lot. So the first effect that is in the loops of the Mastermind is the preamp pedal, which in this case is the Lightspeed from Greer amps. It's a little dirty right now. Typically I don't run that hot, so typically I would probably run it about here. The thing about this pedal is you can use it as a first stage drive if you want as well. That's about where I'd want it, and depending on the guitar, I'd turn the frequency up just a little bit, just to kind of give me a different, like an EQ of sorts there. So I probably would leave this a little over halfway. Second is my Pog. It's just a Pog Nano. Nothing special, just a Pog. Let's talk about the way the Mastermind is set up. So I have stomp mode, which is basically all of my dry effects. Out of the Mastermind, whenever I leave that, it goes into all of my wet effects. So things like delay, reverb, etc. I will say that my modulation stuff right now is in a loop. It's in the Audition loop, which basically sits on the outside of my pedal board so that I can plug a pedal in without really having to rip my board apart. Right now that's just a Walrus Julia. I was using the Strymon Mobius, but things change a lot on my board, so depending on what I'm doing and the mood I'm in. So right now in its place is the Memory Man, but right now it's going Cali 76 into the Mastermind, out of the Mastermind into the Memory Man, to the Timeline, the Big Sky, and then back into my Goodwood Audio Underfacer, which at that point goes to the Tonex units or the Kempers or the amps, whatever it is I'm using that particular day. So on to the drives. So I don't always stack my drives. Right now I'm kind of in a phase where I don't at all, really. I do leave the preamp pedal on most of the time. Some pedals don't really work well with other pedals, and it's just one of those things where it's just like, hey, you know, if they're not really mixing together very well, I'll just run them separately, and I'm not afraid to do that. I actually prefer that a lot of times. Like I said, depending on the pedal. So the first drive that I'm using right now is the JHS Bonsai, and it is set to the JHS setting. So here's the Bonsai. Just a tube screamer, pretty much. That is without the Lightspeed, so the preamp pedal, without that on. So with that, and again, I'll turn the drive down on the preamp a little bit. Really all I'm looking for out of the preamp is a little boost of volume and EQ. Next up would be the X Pandora, so that pedal gets changed out a lot with the Kilt from JHS, which is also based off of the X Pandora. So here's that pedal. So that is with the preamp pedal, and without the preamp. It's just a hairy pedal. I mean, it's a lot of gain, and that is the way I usually run that pedal. A lot of times, if I need something a little heavier than the bonsai, and I don't have the kilt where I can switch over to the blue mode, I will run that like a little less gain, so I can go here. Not a whole lot less. I mean, the pedal's pretty wide open most of the time. And then the next pedal, which would be the final drive pedal, would be the 1981 DRV, and that is here. Usually don't run that with the preamp pedal because it is a lot of gain, but this is what that sounds like. So, yeah, pedal by Matt Hoops from 1981 and Reliant K, of course. So, great pedal. It's basically a Rat. Works just as good as any Rat that I've ever used, any vintage Rat. Definitely better than the factory, like current Rats without any mods, anything like that. So, all right, so next up is the Audition. Like I said, right now it is the Julia, but it could be anything at any given moment. That just sounds like this. So very sour, just enough to kind of punch out of the mix a little bit. I go to where I want it, and then I go a little bit more just to make it pop out in the mix just a touch. Okay, so out of the Mastermind, I go into the Memory Man, and the Memory Man is basically set to where I just tap it really fast and make it a slapback. So I don't typically use the modulation effects on the Memory Man. I usually have a chorus pedal or vibrato pedal, so I'll usually just turn that on. I'd rather just the ability to kind of mix and match rather than have one baked in already. So the timeline is controlled by a disaster area MIDI clock, and I mean, I can set the tempo per song with the Mastermind, but this is more handy on the go. And yes, I know that I can key in the BPM from the timeline, but I also do have the Memory Man or whatever pedal is in that slot tied into that as well as like if I use the Mobius, any tremolos, any of that kind of stuff can all go through that MIDI clock. It's nice to have it right there. Again, the Mastermind will program that per song, but the MIDI clock is really there for on the fly. I don't want to have to, tap in up here because I'm scared I'm going to bump a knob or something, or I'll have to tap in here and the Memory Man. Okay, so a little sample of just a preset that's saved in my Mastermind that, like I said, this will pull up any combination of presets that are saved to it. So, a combination of dry effects, then MIDI out of the Mastermind to pull up effects and all that stuff, BPM information. And so that sounds like this. And I don't usually need more than two unless it's just something really crazy. And then I can go up to 4 per song with the way this is set up right now. Again, I don't usually do that. And I do have like a default bank of presets as well. That if I'm playing and I know that I'm going to need rhythm, I've got that tone, I've got like a ambient tone, I've got a couple things going on that I can always kind of count on. So worth noting on that though is that the MIDI clock is then controlled on those presets by the actual MIDI clock as opposed to the Mastermind. So if I'm in a song, I would pretty much have to reach up here and tap in these pedals if I wanted to bypass the built-in BPM. So if I go to my workflow preset that's kind of got all my banks of stuff that I use pretty regularly, it's controlled here. And that is what's used the most. I don't always really program a whole song. In this case, like I've got some Bethel stuff that I've got presets for. So it's really nice to just pull those up. Now, if I know that a set list is set in stone, it's not really going anywhere, I'll program those. I probably won't do all the preset changes with the drives and all of that. I'll probably just run that manually. At least the tempo information is saved. I don't have to tap. I really, there's nothing I hate more than tapping tempo out in a service. So, and I can bank up and down in songs. I can also bank up and down here if I wanted, like that's how I would control the bank up and down for those pedals. So like right now I am on the timelines bank up and down setting. And over here I've got my Big Skies bank up and down settings as well. And I can just save that, and it is now a part of that preset. So now that I pulled up that preset, I can just go straight into that song without really any trouble at all. So I can save like drive combinations, like I said, on this as well. So if I go here, I've got my lead intro for that song. But then if I go here, I've got my rhythm. Also worth mentioning is the Walrus Audio Canvas. So I just had a conversation today with somebody about the fact that I would never use a pedal like the Tonex or the Iridium, the ACS1, any of these like stomp box amp modeler type pedals without this direct box or something of the nature. I mean, I know that there's other options, right? There is a mode on this called DI. That's pretty self-explanatory. There is also LI, which I think is line injection. I don't know. Just gonna say that. Now, disclaimer, I did just realize that I shot this entire video in the DI mode, which explains a problem that I was having actually. So on my interface, I noticed that I had to go up really high on that. I never changed that, so I assumed that it was just on. But because I was in DI mode, I had to go to plus 48 to 50, depending on which Tonex it was, on the gain, which is a recipe for more gain noise and a lot of just stuff. And then you mix that in like at front of house, they've got all kinds of stuff that they're balancing, and then guitar player to guitar player, their gain structure changes. Like if I played a Kemper one week and played this the next, or the next guy played this the next, their gain's all over the place, which I get. It is their job to change the gains and get that all right. But I don't want to just have this low, puny output level, right? And so this is the Tonex units going through the Walrus stereo in line injection mode. So we're going to start there. That is a pretty strong signal. So for perspective, I'm not going to regain everything. I'm just going to flip the switch, and then I will show you what an actual direct box would have given you in this situation. Now, granted, right now I am now at plus 26 on one box and 24 on the other. Again, I had to be at 48 to 50. So this is the Walrus Canvas, just as a normal direct box. Problem with that is you may not even hear that in the video. So yeah, it's about a 20 dB difference, and that makes a lot of difference whenever it comes to, you know, even especially if you're on like a cheaper preamp that is just prone to noise the higher up you go on that, right? So the last thing you want to do is introduce your own noise if they're having to go with, you know, cheap preamps or something. But again, you know, you want to get it right at the source. even if you're using great preamps. That doesn't mean that you want to crank the gain on those things. So there was one time that David Crowder was telling a story about his dad. And he said, son, you can't control much, but you can tune your guitar. So as far as the Tonexes go, I'm using a capture from Tone Shepherd. Two actually. So one on each unit, and one is the ProSonic and one is the Vox AC30. It's a big surprise, right? So if you know me, you know that that is the combination that I love and I trust. So yeah, hope that is useful.